Well, we need to talk about things that are just different than your PC. If I want to build something special to be a gaming machine, a CAD-CAM machine, an audio-video editing machine, an at-home server, that one gets me excited. We need to know how to build it and what the important parts for maintaining these things are and the best components to put in the systems themselves. So let's take a look at different types of customized client environments and what that means to us when we're in the field as well as at home. So let's start our PowerPoint, if I can find my button. There we go. So we're going to look at the most common types of computers that we're in front of, and then, of course, the customized kind. So what we have at home and what you probably have in your office now is what's called a thick client. This is a normal standard business computer. This means that the operating system, the CPU, all of the decisions are in-house and on board. The decisions are being made within that computer. Now, this is the most common type of end user computer, and they're all administered either locally or by a server. So all of the clients usually will have different hardware and features and applications that are specific to either that company or that user. But thick clients at least can run their apps locally, and they can also store things locally. So you see that there's a list of different requirements per se on your screen. Now, if there's a thick client, that means that there is a thin client. So thin clients are kind of the dumb version of thick clients, and they're going to really rely on a completely different system, which is usually a server, to do most of the processing and actually house the applications or programs that it uses. Now, the setup required to use these is very specific to a user's needs, and honestly, it just depends on what kind of job they're in. So if they need access to certain applications, pieces of software, certain data and files, then they'll get a thin client in front of them and then have access to those apps and files and data that are housed on a server. So the system requirements are much, much lower in regards to the physical computer in front of you if you're using a thin client. And that's because it's going to rely so much on that server to do all the processing for it. So it will run an operating system, and then after that, you just need some really, really solid network connection. So lots of bandwidth, high speed, and be able to rely on that server to have those higher end specs instead of each individual computer in front of you. So what's the difference and why do we use thin clients? Well, two things. Thin clients are used a lot in public spaces. So middle schools and high schools, public libraries, places where people need to access some pretty surface level applications, but they don't necessarily want a lot of hardware on their floor, meaning they don't want expensive things to be out there that can be tinkered with, stolen, tampered with, or maybe even just damaged by general use. Somebody might spill food or drink on them. They might, kick under their computer or fall on it. Crazy things happen in public spaces. The other reason that we have thin clients, and where you'll see them used quite a bit, is in huge business enterprise places where you have thousands and thousands of users, and you just need to get these people online and in front of the same systems in and out of every day. So in that case, it's a lot less expensive financially to buy 1,000 thin clients, 1,000 monitors, 1,000 keyboards and mice, and then have a super heavy duty server that can handle all of that traffic. That is a lot thinner than buying pretty decently or high powered computers for 1,000 different users. So you'll see a difference here in the requirements, and you can go back and forth in the video to see the difference between the thin and thick client requirements. Moving forward though, let's get into specialized builds. Now, one of the most common, and for me one of the most fun, is virtualization workstations. These are computers that use both hardware and virtualization and client virtualization to provide a really rich environment for their end users. So that means that instead of having 3 different computers to run 3 different operating systems, I have one really, really powerful computer to run well, pretty much however many operating systems I either want or, in all reality, can handle. And this is why having the maximum amount of RAM and CPU cores is vital for a virtualization workstation. So have you ever had a Mac and then a separate computer or laptop to run Windows? Well, you can actually do that on one piece of hardware now. If you have an Apple laptop or computer, then you can use this thing called Basecamp to run Windows. But if you don't want to use something that's built in or have the restrictions that are within that Apple hardware, then you can run these things called VMs, virtual machines. That means on my Windows computer right now, I could open multiple operating systems or pretty much Windows that are like a whole separate computer. That computer will think that it has its own set of hardware and software, but in all reality, it's running on the same hardware as my normal Windows operating system. And I am not restricted to what OS I can open. As long as I have a legit copy of the software and the operating system, I can do whatever I want. So I can open 1 or 2 versions of Linux and 2 or 3 different Windows OSs. Maybe I want to play with 2 or 3 different Windows 10 computers at the same time. I can just open different instances of Windows 10. Maybe I want to step back in time in Windows XP or Vista. I could actually open one or even both of those on my computer, and I would have my primary OS, which right now is Windows 10, and then I would have a Windows XP screen and a Windows 7 screen, meaning that I have 3 operating systems running at the exact same time, and they all think they're their own computer. Like, they think they're a real boy, like Pinocchio, but in all reality, everything's operating from the same hardware. Now, this saves a lot of money, but you need a really, really beautifully put together computer to make this happen. And the 2 most critical things here, again, are your RAM and your CPU cores. Because if you want to run more than one operating system, each of those are going to have not only their minimum requirements, but you're going to want to have those operating systems do cool things, right? You're going to open internet browsers, you're going to open applications and software. So you need to have enough RAM to support all of the operating systems that you're going to have running simultaneously. So let's get into kind of, I want to say, the big boy or big girl versions of these computers. So when we go above and beyond just a normal thick client in our home environment, or maybe even just a really souped up thick client, there's really customized environments that we can build. And the first one that you see on screen, and I love how fancy these are a CAD-CAM workstation. Really, what we're talking about here are media design workstations, and they're configured to support graphic designers, engineers, architects. You even have 3D media developers, so they can create amazing stuff here. Now, the hardware and software is definitely specific to the job role, and what we're looking at has to be on the highest end here. Is a multi-core processor is important, but the absolute best graphics card you can get is one of the most critical things for a CAD-CAM workstation, because we're rendering 3D graphics, sometimes with architecture or engineering. If we are designing some new 3D awesomeness, we have to have a graphics card that can support that. Now, of course, the one thing you can see here, and probably the first thing you notice, is that there are a bunch of monitors around. And that's one of the things that's unique to a CAD-CAM workstation as well. Most likely, you're going to have more than 2 monitors. You'll see 5 of them in one of the pictures here, and you see a 3-monitor display, but actually, if you look a little bit further over towards the light, you'll see additional monitors on the other side of the computer. Now, there's multiple systems that are actually hooked up in that one, but on average, 3 to 5 monitors is pretty normal in these type of work environments. So some of the software you might be running, and this is definitely not a full list, but some options are the Adobe Creative Suite of some kind. And now the Adobe Creative Suite is cloud-based. So that could be one of the options here. You have different 3D softwares that you can use. And CAD and CAM, which you hear me say so many times, stands for Computer Aided Design. and manufacturing. So computer-aided design or computer-aided manufacturing, and that's where the words CAD/CAM come from. So GPU, your graphics processing unit or graphics card, has got to be really, really high-end. And let's touch a little bit on CAD and CAM workstations themselves, and then we'll push on to the next one. So CAD workstations, they're really unique because they require both hardware and software to meet really, really high-end requirements to make 3D designs. So not only the graphics card needs to be upgraded, but you have to have super solid monitors. And every once in a while, you'll see somebody who's working legitimately with a specialized input device like a pen or a digitizing tablet, which means they can actually draw onto that surface or that device, and it is going to interact with that 3D software. Now, on the other side is the CAM, or computer-aided manufacturing workstations. And again, specialized hardware and specialized software, but these are more in the line of controlling machine tools that are in those big manufacturing environments. So you might have specialized control cards and connections to make sure that they can survive in really harsh environments like manufacturing buildings. Automotive buildings use CAM workstations a lot, and they need to be what we call hardened, or we're going to find all the weaknesses in them and make sure that they're physically and digitally protected. So when you throw something into the middle of a manufacturing floor and you have it controlling machinery like CNC machines or these automated factory line machines that put all these great stuff together, we're looking at CAD and CAM workstations. They're awesome. We rely on them to make things happen behind the scenes and to build all the cool toys that we play with, big or small. Now, AV editing workstations are always really cool. This is where the magic happens that makes movies and all the music that you love to listen to. And it's really, you have to have a powerful computer set up as far as the editing of any audio and video, especially if you're on the video side. Again, that graphics card is going to be really, really important. And if you're doing audio, I am really confident that you're not relying on your integrated laptop or computer speakers. So you're going to have some upgraded sound card as well. So most professional video that's taken today, not the home video or on your phone, but think about movies, there have special effects and CGI. CGI actually stands for computer generated imagery, if you didn't know. So that's when you hear about oh, it looked so fake, or oh, it looks so real, they were in the fire and they magically came out. That's CGI, and CGI has made huge differences on our entertainment. But all of this stuff takes special editing software, and there are an endless amount of options out there. The ones I know I've used before are Sony's. They have this thing called the Vegas Pro. Apple, of course, comes with iMovie, so you can use that in productions big and small. Adobe has Premiere and Elements, and the list just goes on and on and on, to be completely honest. Now, what are the things that you just have to have for an AV station? Well, we already talked about the graphics card and a sound card. And if you're going to be using CGI or any 3D, then you need to make sure that your video card supports that. Having a huge hard drive, solid state's recommended because it's so much faster. But you're working with a lot of information, a lot of data, terabytes probably. So you want to make sure you have a place to store all of that good stuff. Let's see what else. You will see AV editing workstations with multiple displays. Usually 2 to 3 is average here in comparison to your 3 or more in your CAD/CAM environments. So even though the specs are, they're in line with each other, some are more important than others, and you'll see where those unique differences come in. So the video card is important in both, and multiple monitors is important in both. But a lot of RAM and a really, really fast environment is good for CAD/CAM. And a ridiculous amount of storage space is required for AV editing. So what's the most common thing that you hear when people say, I want to get in IT, especially kids, right? They want to game. They want to play games. Sometimes they want to design games. Most people do not understand the type of work it takes to design games. So let's just all want to be gamers. I can work with that in the world. So a gaming PC, not a gaming system, but a gaming PC is something that has really, really high-end graphics, super fast processing, and a lot of RAM. Does that sound familiar from the CAD-CAM? Absolutely. So the main difference between a gaming PC and any of the other workstations is that these are specifically designed to support the demanding or those on-demand gaming requirements. Because when you tell your character to move, you want him to respond appropriately and quickly, because the last thing you need to do is tell him to dive behind a rock and you have lag and he gets shot in the face. So what do we require to make this happen? Well, a really high-end graphics processing unit or video card, because you're definitely going to have 3D graphics, and the newer the game is, the more realistic the imagery is in the PC. So you have a lot of different platforms that you can use, and of course some of your top games, and I'm not going to name any because everybody has favorites and there's a huge variety. But every gaming PC are going to have specific requirements, but they're going to be based on what game or games you're playing. Multi-core processor, super high-end video card, sound card. If you have some audio that's attached to that, maybe you want to support surround sound. But here's the thing that is unique to your gaming systems. I want you to remember this: high-end cooling. Liquid cooling. If you're ever asked a question about what is the most efficient cooling method or what cooling method should be used with a gaming system, liquid cooling is the answer every single time. So remember that even though some of these builds have very, very similar needs, there's always one unique thing that makes it stand out from any of the other systems. Now, if you're not a gamer, you might be into movies, and that means that you're familiar with or would really like a home theater PC. Now, what I'm about to talk about is definitely old in comparison to the technology that we have available now, because everybody's got Netflix and we can watch it on our phone and our laptop and our TV and pretty much anywhere we want. So I need you to keep in mind that we are test prepping sometimes instead of real life prepping, and that this test was made over a year ago, so technology was not where it is today. So an HTPC, a home theater PC, is a computer that you have completely configured and is dedicated to store movies or stream movies. Now, if you're holding them and storing them on a local hard drive, that means that you're going to need a lot of hard drive space, meaning storage space in your HTPC. If you're looking at the other option, which is streaming, that means you probably have some type of online subscription, and hopefully not any of the most awesome options, which are now slowly but surely becoming less than legal in most parts of the world. But I'll always have my Kodi box. So with that being said, let's learn about what the requirements are for these babies. So a TV tuner card is going to be an appropriate card or feature of an HTPC. And that means you have the ability to display high definition digital output, as well as attaching this to cable, like literally screwing your cable connection into the back of it so that you can access normal TV channels. Now, a TV tuner card is one way to do that. The most appropriate way as well is a cable card. So that's going to give you the ability to authenticate and communicate through this box instead of one of those set-top boxes or cable boxes. So if you have a cable subscription through Time Warner or Comcast or whoever it is in your local area, they have their own box that they want you to hook up to. But if you want to use your own box and still be able to access your channels, you can do that with a cable card. So what are some other things that are pretty much requirements in a home theater PC? Think about it. Well, I want to make sure that I've got a DVD player, Blu-ray player at this point, so that any of my movies that I have on optical disc can be played. So think about those things. Those are what are unique. Again, the TV tuner card, the cable card, and making sure that you have a Blu-ray or some type of optical disc player in your home theater PC. Also, that's not necessarily unique, but you should have a lot of storage space in your HTPC to be able to store movies locally. You should also have some specialized software, and there's a lot of different applications out there that you can use, whether it's like a VLC media player or you have Kodi or XBMC is what it used to be called. If you're on a Windows system, you could actually use Windows Media Player, Windows Media Center if you wanted to. But you need the software to make sure that you can play the movies and files that you have housed locally. So what is next? Where do we keep all the information? Well, at home, a specialized or custom build is a home server PC. And it's literally a server for your house so that you can connect all of your devices and store information, whether it's videos, pictures, music, files, whatever it may be. And it's also really cool because it gives you centralized access to store everything. So if you have, let's say, 4 people in your house and you have one printer, instead of setting up the printer individually for everybody and a place to share files for everybody, you could just set up a home server PC and it's going to administer all of this for you. And that way you can cut your brother's access off to the printer when he's on your nerves. No, don't do that. I'm just kidding. But the home setup usually includes your wireless network so that everybody can get to these resources without having to connect or hardwire to the network. So you just upload all your stuff into pretty much your own personal cloud and give everybody within your home access to it. So there's a lot of different features and functions, but the requirements that are pretty common are as follows. Media streaming capabilities, because if you're storing movies or music or videos, you want everybody to be able to reach those videos and play them. File sharing is an absolute must because that's the entire purpose here. Print sharing is pretty common if you still have a printer at home. The one thing I want to make sure that you have installed in your home theater PC is something we called a gigabit NIC. And that just means that it's going to support a really fast connection speed, because when you're transferring really large files over a wireless network, you want to be able to do so as fast as possible. So if you have this super cool network interface card in your server, you also need to make sure that your router is compatible with that type of speed, meaning just like on our motherboard conversation, whichever is the slowest component is the most restrictive. Well, if you're going to put a 100-mile-an-hour card in your server, you need to make sure that your router can actually go 100 miles an hour and that the road that you put all this data on is able to handle data running at 100 miles an hour. So once you get everything on the same page, you can have data to all of your devices at home super, super quick. The one last thing that you may see implemented here, and it's something that we've talked about before, is RAID. What does RAID stand for? I'll give you a second. All right, redundant array of independent disks. That's one of the things that you will probably see in a home theater, in a home server PC. Because if you're going to store all of your data there, you want to make sure that in case anything goes wrong as far as a drive failing, that you have backups. So implementing RAID here, usually either RAID 10 or 5 is most appropriate, but at the very minimum, implement your mirroring, which is RAID what? Which one is RAID 1 or 0 for mirroring? Well, if you said 1, you are correct, because RAID 1 is mirroring and RAID 0 is striping. So making sure that you have some redundancy here is really important. So you have learned about all kinds of different customized builds in your computing environment per se. And now you'll be prepared to answer those questions about what is unique about each one. So if you're asked about which type of computer is going to need liquid cooling, what's the answer? Gaming, absolutely. And if you want to be able to support 3D graphics, even though more than one answer is correct here, what is the best answer based on our lecture? CAD-CAM systems are the ones that are most likely going to need to support creating 3D graphics. And which one will have 2 to 3 monitors on average? Well, if you said gaming, you're right. And if you said CAD, you're still correct. But when we're looking at preparing for our test, I want you to think of the best answer for the details given. So when I said 2 to 3 monitors, AV editing is the best answer. Well, why the heck is that? Well, gaming is going to be between 1 and 2 monitors, and multiple monitors are not one of the most important or critical factors. And when we look at CAD-CAM systems, it's average actually to have 3 or more monitors. So what is the best answer for 2 to 3 monitors? That's going to be AV editing. I don't want you to get frustrated with the details of it, but I want you to understand that when they hit you with certain types of questions, they're wanting you to think about the differences and what is the absolute best answer for the questions that they have in front of you. So take this time, review the different types of customized client environments. You have some of that good stuff in your book, and it goes into detail as far as what those differences are. I want you to make sure you're prepared for that because you will come across test questions on just those finite little differences. And don't forget, way early in the lesson, we talked about thin versus thick clients. And that, to be honest, in your job role is going to be important. So make sure that you're comfortable with those two. I'll see you soon for your next lecture. And don't forget, a quiz is coming up.